Alright, this time I figured we would talk about two baseball movies that are, not only do they center around their central characters are like two kids who like really, really love the sport a lot, like they live and breathe it, but the problem is that they kind of suck at it too. I don't know if you could say that about Henry Rowan Gardner as much, because it just seems like he more so sucks as like an outfielder. Because like when he's like in the laundry room at the beginning, we can see he can actually throw even before he breaks his arm. They're just putting him in the wrong place. But yeah, Smalls is pathetic.
I don't know if you realize you did this or not with the timing, but it's funny that you picked two baseball movies and the World Series wrapped up like last week.
Oh yeah, and both of these are have been celebrating their 25th anniversaries this year. They both came out in 1993. Because I've seen Thomas Ian Nicholas has been on like a couple of sports shows or whatever, kind of doing it in the uniform, and they just recently had like a Sandlot reunion. The only one that didn't show up was Benny, and I think just a few years ago he like headbutted a cop or something and was serving time for that. No, he didn't serve time for that, but he could have. Nobody knew where he was at the time, but. So yeah, I figured we go. Obviously, Owen really wanted Rookie of the Year to go with Little Big League, but I just kind of felt like this was more appropriate, especially since The Sandlot is a significantly more beloved movie.
Did you ever notice this on the back of the box here? One of the ACE is Raja Gosnell.
Oh my god! The director of Beverly Hills Chihuahua actually had something to do with a movie with quality. So
I just saw that, like just sitting here.
So I figure we probably start with The Sandlot and then move over to Rookie of the Year.
That's fine.
So I think the thing that really stands out about The Sandlot pretty much immediately, and the fact that it has the following that it does and has for so long, and is kind of it's one of those movies that kind of continuously goes through like generations, it seems, where people are still talking about it. There was a picture of Patrick Renna, who plays Ham, had a picture on Twitter of him like watching it with his kid. And it really kind of, a really great comparison that I saw once was, they say that like what a Christmas story is to the Christmas season is what The Sandlot is to summer, basically. And that goes like all the way down to it, like the period era and the narrator and all that. The narrator is actually the director, Dave Mickey Evans, despite the fact that Smalls in person when he's grown up is played by Arliss Howard. I don't know. There's something wrong here, but yeah, and just the fact that it pretty much basically epitomizes like a child's idea of summer as a whole, but also kind of just in the instance of like one particular moment when Smalls first shows up and they're on the field and he sees that they're playing, but it's like an endless game where they don't really keep score and it just kind of goes on forever. And that sort of gives you that idea of how basically when you're that age it feels like summer basically goes forever. And so just the way it really epitomizes it with that. But also not just through the whole story itself, but just using the game as that also, I think is a really great way to show that off.
Yeah.
And with obviously, the central character seems to be Benny. We're just seeing him through Smalls' eyes. But you could say Smalls is probably our main character, because we do get like a whole, he's where we're coming from, and we do get to see a lot of things from his perspective, and not just his friends, but also like his relationship with Dennis Leary that's somewhat going on, which is really nice, and like how authentic it is.
He sucks so bad at the beginning.
You say at the beginning, but that kind of continues too.
Yeah.
I mean, when he catches the ball that first time, it was just luck. Like they just hit it into his hand, luckily. But the thing about that also is the fact that, especially, I can kind of relate, because I grew up with a lot of like people. Like I went to school with a lot of people that were more or less athletic, especially compared to me. I was not athletic in any way, nor did I have any, drive to. So there's something that's like when you see it, you are kind of have like a secondhand embarrassment for him. Despite the fact that we can laugh at just how much he sucks and his stupid hat and all that. But there's also kind of something genuinely sad about how humiliating that first time is for him. And like I said, the authenticity is what makes it come through when I talk about not just that, but the relationship with Dennis Leary also, where it's like they could have really easily played Dennis Leary up as like the movie stepdad, like like Radio Flyer or some shit. And the thing here, which I think
the stepfather.
yeah, funnily enough, I think Dave Mickey Evans may have been a writer on Radio Flyer, but or he may have written it himself, but. But yeah, the fact that Smalls has like that really relatable anxiety about the things with Larry, like the way he sort of goes into his room but kind of doesn't want to, or when he gets Larry to play catch with or teach him how to play catch again, and when his mom like pushes it, and it's like Larry's like, okay, I guess I can put my work down and do this, but still Smalls is saying like, oh God. It's like he's not that upset, but still you pulled him away from work, and now it looks like it's my fault. And that relationship between them two, the way Smalls starts off in the narration by saying they're getting used to each other, pretty much sums it up really nicely. And that's something that's nice to see throughout. Even though Leary like disappears for the second half of the movie, so we can do the whole they fuck up his ball thing.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about that kind of stuff?
I think what also makes the Sandlot like kind of stand out and survive time is like there's a ton of movies where you have like the big group of kids, like the Little Rascals and stuff like that,
which was just the next year.
Yeah, but I feel like everybody in the Sandlot, even if you didn't have all of those friends, all of us had people that were like those friends.
Yeah, you even have like Bertram is the kid that's probably the geekiest kid there, and it's like Bertram is the first one of the first ones to call Smalls a geek. And you're like, holy shit, this kid's really geeky. Bertram calls him a geek.
Yeah.
And then there's just that whole sort of like the awkwardness is always there too. Not just with Smalls. Obviously, it's very much there with Smalls. One scene that sort of makes me cringe beyond belief is when because I talk about how I wasn't athletic. Never ever in my life would I have ever done the moment when he goes and gets the ball after Leary threw it, and when he chickens out throwing it, he just runs up to him and puts it in his glove. But
and he does that in his first baseball game too, because the kids are like, really?
It's also worth noting it is hilarious that a very large plot point in this movie is the fact that Dennis Leary's a diehard Yankees fan, when in real life he's a Boston fan.
Yeah.
It's like that's good acting right there.
Yeah. It's like what Mickey Rourke said about Sean Penn and Milk.
Yeah. So,
I also think I like the scene where the Babe Ruth ball goes over into the yard, and like it's like it never really dawned on me until I saw that part last night, where like where did they come up with the ideas on how to get it? Like the 3 vacuum cleaners and like.
Yeah, because they sort of set up what Smalls does at the beginning, because that's just what he does in his room every summer. But it's like, whatever they were.
The fact that it just gets so out of hand.
Yeah, and the great thing you'll notice about this, too, you were talking about how, comparing it to other movies, you know what else is really interesting about The Sandlot? Is it's a baseball movie that's not building up to a game.
Yeah,
and like it has nothing to do with like winning. There's like one game in it, and like it's entirely played for laughs.
Yeah,
and it's because and even that that game, it's not even about beating those kids. It's just really it's just for the scene with Ham provoking them. Is basically all it's there for. and the setup scene earlier where he's just throwing nonsensical insults at them. Always reminded me very much of once again the Triple Dog Dare scene in A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
Just the way they kind of throw it back and forth. Because I think their stories are set like 2 decades apart. I think A Christmas Story is supposed to be like the 40s, and this is the 60s. But you can really see a lot of similarities there.
Also, it's I always kind of related to it too, where the ball gets hit over in the yard, and that's the yard that like every kid in their neighborhood had that yard that if a ball went over there, that you were done.
We had like 3 of those yards.
Yeah, we did.
They were like all around.
Yeah, the one like the lady threatened to stab our football, like you had.
What you guys did in retaliation is a whole other story we won't go into.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure there's like felonies involved and shit.
Shit, literally.
Yeah.
But but the thing also that's great about the Sandlot is after a while, we just really opened a door there. We're not walking through. The people are going to wonder what the hell that means.
Yeah.
But the great thing also about the Sandlot is once we get that middle portion, because usually like a movie will tend to have like a strong opening, or like those particular scenes that you like wait for that you really like, or a really nice end or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There
Or for you, the scenes you dread, like the tobacco scene.
Oh god, yeah, the tequila scene, my favorite scene ever.
Uh-huh.
But the thing here is the entire middle portion of the Sandlot is just consecutive memorable scenes. Because you've got like the scene at the pool with Marla Shelton playing Wendy Peppercorn. I love the when Squints is going up to the diving board, and the whole idea of, we know what his sinister plan is, that he's got like that maniacal chuckle as he's walking out. And then like right after the pool scene is the 4th of July game, which is a really great scene. And then after that is all the insults, the "you play ball like a girl" is like the worst possible thing you can say. Then I think right after that's the tequila scene. So like that is the whole middle portion of the movie. It's just those scenes one right after the other, which is a really great run. Because usually the middle is where a movie tends to lose its way or kind of run out of gas or whatever, and that's like where they put all the great stuff. It's like right in the middle of it.
There's a lot of movies that a lot of the memorable stuff from it happens at either beginning or the end. There's nothing really that falls in the middle that's memorable in a lot of movies. Like, I think a great example of that's Full Metal Jacket. Like, when I was in school, everybody quoted R. Lee Ermey throughout. And then when I finally saw the movie, I was like, well, after the first, 45 minutes?
Something like that.
He's gone. That's the end of those quotes.
It's nice to use Full Metal Jacket because Arliss Howard doesn't leave the conversation. He's and also, but the fact also is that that's just not, that's where all like the memorable scenes are, but that's not like where all the good stuff is, because all the stuff before that is the stuff with Leary, and all the stuff after that is the getting the ball back thing. So it's like all one big whole that just happens to have all the, like it could almost feel episodic, but there's something that feels whole about it.
It kind of feels like that it's something. Like, it's summed up in a, hour and a half, hour 40 movie. These movies are only 2 minutes apart in runtime, too. But it feels like the course of that movie feels like it could go over a whole summer.
Yeah.
Like, it starts with you leaving school and going out and trying to play baseball and making new friends, and your last-ditch adventure is to try to get the ball back.
And talking about him coming out like after school, I do also like how he doesn't really have to, like, usually in the case they're like a complete and total outcast, but I like that he sort of has Benny there as like kind of his way in, because Benny's like the one character that he doesn't really have to work to impress. Like, Benny already kind of takes to
He's
him
already
in.
he's already got him on his side.
Because there's even that moment where he seems like dejected at the beginning when he waves at Benny, and Benny just kind of gives him the nod, and it kind of looks like he looks rejected. I was like, dude, you got a nod. Like, it's fine. It's like he's so used to rejection. Like that's like that's that sad thing I was talking about, where it's like it's really easy to make fun of Smalls, but when you see where he's coming from, it's like you really want him to have those friends, no matter how pathetic he comes off.
Yeah.
I also like the idea of talking about the final portion when they get the ball back, and how we get the really nice moment when when Squints tells the story about the Beast, and it's like that, you know, classic everything scary is going to seem exaggerated as a kid. There were a couple of those around our neighborhood too. But the thing here is that after the build-up of that story, and we do see how exaggerated the Beast looks in that story, hilariously exaggerated, what you expect the payoff to be is like the Beast will be like really tiny when we see him or something. It'll be like a Chihuahua or something. I kind of like the fact that he really is a big motherfucker.
Yeah, he really is a big dog.
It's like, you keep waiting for that one moment where it's going to be some reveal that's the total opposite, but it's like, nah, they kind of all had a reason to be afraid of him. Which takes us to James Earl Jones. I've always wondered if the presence of James Earl Jones is an intentional reference to Field of Dreams. I have no idea, but I've always wondered that. Did you also notice, right before we go through the whole scene of when he first hits the ball over, it's actually before that, it's when Benny destroys the first ball, and then he goes to get Leary's ball. When the narrator says, this is when, that big moment happened, that big pickle that we were all in. And just as it says that, there's a giant billboard for dog food that says, inside the happiest dogs in America or something. And it's like a can of dog food inside a giant dog. It's like foreshadowing. So, yeah, so that's pretty much where I stand with the Sandlot. Because I didn't... how old were you when you saw it? Or, like, what era was it?
High school, maybe?
Yeah, because a lot of people, obviously, really grew up on this. The way we grew up on Rookie of the Year. I grew up on Rookie of the Year because you got it for, like, your 10th birthday in one of the big VHS boxes. And then we just watched it constantly. I had to seek out the Sandlot when I was a bit older. So I didn't really have necessarily the attachment to it to start off that I did with something like Rookie of the Year, but I do think there's just sort of... There's something different that it evokes than Rookie of the Year. They've definitely got, like... I mean, we'll get to that, and Rookie of the Year has, like, some, like, genuinely nice moments in it. But the Sandlot, I think, is the reason it's got the status that it does, is because of that whole... just sort of the authenticity of what it's portraying, and sort of the meaningful way it goes about that.
Would Sandlot make your top 5 in a list of similar movies to it? Not the movie It, but similarities to Sandlot itself.
Well, it's kind of got... if you put a monster in the Sandlot, you've got it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It depends on what you put in there, really. That's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, because you could throw The Little Rascals in, you could throw, like, sports kids movies in, Rookie of the Year in.
Well, really anything... You know what the Sandlot feels like it has a lot of, actually? The Sandlot feels like a PG Stand By Me a lot of the time, too.
Yeah.
So I probably put it in more serious contention with stuff like that. I did not see the direct-to-video sequel. I think there's only one.
Of the Sandlot, I believe so.
Yeah, and at first you kind of dismissed that, but the same director made it.
Yeah, but everything I've heard about it is it just makes you want to pop back in the first one.
That's not surprising at all.
Kind of like taking a shot of, like, tequila and then you want to chase it with, like, Coke or Pepsi or something.
Tequila, how appropriate.
Yeah, that's why I used it.
Oh, okay.
That was intentional.
So, should we go on to Rookie of the Year?
Yeah.
Alright, there's something I immediately want to start off with Rookie of the Year.
That it got 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah, which is great. I think the Sandlot did as well.
Yep, sure.
Actually, I think Ebert's the one that made the Christmas Story comment. But obviously, a lot of people love Rookie of the Year. I've heard it quoted like my entire life, pretty much. As I said, we grew up with it and all that, and it seems to be, have maybe not, as like a devoted following as the Sandlot does, but it's got a big fan base. This movie.
Yeah, like I've been telling you, I listen to the Dan Le Batard show on ESPN Radio, and there's usually at least a weekly reference to it.
And it's really well made. Like, it's a well made comedy. Like the jokes and a lot of the physical gags too are like really set up nicely. How is it Daniel Stern never directed another movie?
I didn't know that this was his only one.
I'm pretty sure it is.
I don't know.
Which is kind of crazy. So
especially since it was so well received.
Yeah, like even when it came out, pretty much. It's also it's. I don't know.
I think what helps, what's interesting too, is Rookie of the Year could easily be a really stupid concept.
Yeah. Well, are you aware it's a remake?
No.
Oh, wait till you hear this. It's a movie from, you talk about, well, I think the reason...
Don't tell me it's a kid in King Arthur's court.
What was, oh shit, what was I saying? Oh, did Angels in the Outfield come out before or after?
Oh man, there were so many movies.
I want to say it was 94, Angels in the Outfield.
I think
came
so.
out, so the following year.
I think so.
But the movie that, obviously Angels in the Outfield, I believe, is also a remake of a movie called Angels in the Outfield. But the movie that Rookie of the Year is a remake of also kind of comes off like Angels in the Outfield. It's a movie called Roogie's Bump, but instead of breaking his arm, he's got like a bump in it,
Mm-hmm.
and the bump is like the spirit of a baseball player that's like making him do it. Yeah.
When did that come out?
1954.
Oh.
So.
Hmm.
So I don't know if it was the fact that like Angels in the Outfield was probably in production when this was also, even though they came out about a year apart, and they decided to mix it up and do the broken arm thing. I have no idea if this had anything to do with each other, but yeah. And once again, we start off with our character. Like I said, I think Henry Rowengartner's given a bad rep he doesn't really deserve. He just keeps getting put in the wrong position because he can clearly throw the ball. But the opening scene plays him up like he's fucking Smalls.
Mm-hmm.
he's so suck ass that the coach that is so hardened, he tells Windermere, "I don't want to hear about that asthma," while he's sneezing. But he still put Windermere in. So clearly he thinks Henry's that bad.
You could make such a list of kids that like suck at, like, especially baseball. like there's Smalls, there's Henry Rowengartner, there's Jack from Hook.
Well, Jack from Hook did get to hit the ball at least.
He was pitched to by Smee. Which, granted, Smee's ball had smoke on it.
Yeah. But, and what's also great, though, about Rookie of the Year is because with the Sandlot, like I said, you gotta...
We need to do a video where we talk about Hook.
I've actually done a Hook video, but I mean...
Oh, damn, I'm sorry I missed that. Hook could have been its own video.
Yeah, good have.
It's like Rookie of the Year levels of quotes.
But the thing here is that the Sandlot has some adult characters like Dennis Leary, James Earl Jones, Karen Allen, and all them. But they're kind of in the background. Much as I like those storylines, they're kind of in the background. Rookie of the Year has plenty of memorable adult characters that are just as memorable as Henry is, if not maybe more so.
Bruce Altman.
I was gonna start with Gary Busey, but if you wanna go into Bruce Altman,
We'll start with Gary Busey.
Well, it's worth noting. It is what's really interesting about Gary Busey is the reputation that he has for being like really out of control, kind of being a douchebag, but the thing is he actually is like a genuinely good actor. Whether he's playing like insane characters or a character like Chet Stedman, where he's got to have a lot of like kind of warmth to him.
He does. Like
I mean, yeah, the very first line he has in the movie is
which is ironically the noise you always reference Nick Nolte with.
Yeah. And they're always getting confused anyway. So.
Yeah. He does do a great job in that movie, like the kind of washed up guy that like just doesn't have it anymore, and there's a new young gun coming in that's outshining him and he has to deal with that. I mean, it's for a kids movie, it's a pretty interesting arc for a character in a kids movie.
What I thought was really interesting was how much it got real when Fish basically told him that they were letting him go, and when he took Henry home and he said, you know, don't get attached to this sport because one day your gift's going to be gone. It's like, that's heavy for this because they play it totally straight.
Yeah.
But there's also like how genuine it feels, because it does feel very like movie-like and cliche that he starts off like, you know, sort of rough towards Henry and standoffish, but then he warms up to him and all that. But it really happens in this really genuine way that's really believable. Even when he's warming up to him, he's still not totally there. Like, he does it passively, like when he signs the ball. But he like doesn't even smile at him. He's just like, there, I signed your ball. But we know he did it because he was impressed with him and wanted to show him that he cared. So I thought that was really nice. He plays it surprisingly well, parts like this. And can also do comedy very well as well. Because he does have even though he's one of the more straight characters in it, he still gets plenty of comedic scenes as well.
It's fun, the scene when Henry goes up to bat. Yeah.
That's gotta be one of the best gags ever, when they fake us out with what the joke is gonna be. When they do the, when Henry's mom's at the flower shop that she's working at and she's watching the game, and it's cutting between the two of them, and she starts to say motherfucker, but then it cuts to him saying mother of God. And then it's like, oh, okay, so that's the setup. So it's like she's going to say something that's going to be crude and she's going to get cut off, and he's going to say something that's a little more PG. no. The very next time they do that joke, like 30 seconds later, she says peace up and he shouts shit. And it's like when you don't see the gag coming, it just really throws you off in this really great way. That's like a brilliant joke that they faked you out with that first setup. I'm gonna tell you, we were talking about this the other day. You know who else I think is absolutely brilliant in this movie? The actor that's not even credited. John Candy is the announcer. Is like, I know it sounds exaggerated because he's just kind of there, and like I said, he's uncredited. But I mean, I love this performance so much because he seems like he's constantly on when this character is two things. He's the big announcer, and he's got that voice. Like, if I didn't know who John Candy was and I saw this, I would think they just got a dude. This is his actual job. But then, like, the second he turns the microphone off, the way he just gets all cynical about everything. And then the way he goes...
And what's funny about that, too, is John Candy's one of, if not the only character that I can think of that we don't see him outside of his job.
Yeah. We don't see him outside of that booth.
No, huh?
But yeah, I just love, like, any frame of him, I just love. But we were talking about all the other people here.
You treat him like people treated Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. Like, John Candy would go away and you'd be like, okay, when's his next scene?
Actually, he's there for so little and really doesn't do a whole lot, but I'm building up so much. He's more probably comparable. He's like my Boba Fett. That's what he is. It's like, people go, really? All he did was announce. And it's like, I don't care, it's brilliant.
Internet, Photoshop Boba Fett's head on John Candy from Rookie of the Year.
And we were talking about some of the other people here. There is Albert Hall, and it's like, I think probably one of my very first introductions to the idea of the running joke was me watching this and the him always mispronouncing Rowan Gardner.
Yeah.
I'm almost disappointed he finally says it right. I mean, I know it's kind of the perfect, end to that joke.
Yeah.
But it's like, it still would have been funny also if he just never got it right.
Yeah.
And then there is, it's even to a point where when he first goes up to the door at Henry's house and rings the doorbell, whenever I watch that now, I'm already laughing because I'm anticipating the first time he says the name wrong. But there's also...
there's actually a YouTube video of just all the wrong names.
Yeah. And it's like a minute long, which for just saying a last name, that's a lot.
And I love how, like, some of them, you can tell he's in the ballpark, and then you get, like, Gardenhoser, which isn't even close.
And you brought up Jack Bradfield a minute ago. Should we go into him?
Sure.
Well, obviously, you gotta have... This movie actually has two douchey villains. They got Dan Hedaya and Bruce Altman.
Yeah.
Fish and Jack Bradfield.
And they both get a kind of fitting comeuppance.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about with Leary, where I said it was nice to see how the Dennis Leary character was treated in The Sandlot.
Because he could have been treated like Jack Bradfield.
Yeah. But the thing here is, it's really just kind of the jokes. Like, you just kind of have to watch him throughout the movie to get some stuff.
Because when we first meet him, if I remember right, he's just kind of there.
Yeah, he's a little forward because Henry makes the reference where she's like, why don't you like him? And he's like, he's moving too fast. And the very first thing he does is walk through and say, we've been together for 3 weeks. Here's an expensive necklace. It's like, but we just think, because that's all Henry had to say was he's moving too fast. So it's like, oh, well, okay. But then, like, as it goes on, and because he's even like...
Which I think is interesting because that's a very subtle way to start that conflict. Like, it's not like, he's trying to be my dad, or he kicked a puppy. It's just, I just think he's moving too fast.
It's like he sort of does to Henry what he does throughout the entire movie, which is just slowly weasels his way in. And I love the little details they throw in there to just make him look like an idiot. Like how his car is so low to the ground, he has to practically crawl in and out of it. One of the things I noticed recently, actually, was did you notice when he starts like wearing the suits and getting the cigars and all that, when Henry starts getting real famous, he starts wearing contacts instead of his glasses?
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Because there's that one cut of him the first time he's not wearing his glasses, and you see him like doing this because he's not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love I love what he did, the effect that he ends up having on Henry's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Where one of the lines I always love because it just kind of comes from out of nowhere was obviously he gets his comeuppance towards like the end of the middle when she like punches him, and you barely hear because her and Henry are both so revved up at this point. But you hear his mom say, "Maybe I should have killed him."
I think what's interesting too is it would have been easy for his mom to start to side with Jack, and he'd have to win her back over. But his mom is always on his side.
Yeah. Like, that's one of the strongest aspects of the movie is the relationship with his mom. Because I was going to mention this later, but it's kind of, we've just gone into it now. It was one of those times where, like, I've seen the movie so many times, but I don't know why, but it was, like, recently where something just really got to me. Like I said, even though, not only have I seen the movie so many times, but it is so blatant when you know. Because it's the whole thing of, he actually didn't know they don't know who his dad is, and he ran off when she was pregnant, and it's actually, she's the one that's actually the role model inadvertently. But it's like, you know, the way they bring up the reference twice that she can throw really well. It's like, the clues are right there. But I mean, still, that moment when he realizes it's her glove is just, it's like the last time I saw it, for some reason, it just hit me hard. But also, another thing now that we've gotten that out of the way, another thing that makes me laugh about Jack Bradfield, and just his loserdom, is you notice that when they first go to the field, like when it's going to be Henry's first day, and they're all running, and they're like all running up, the weird Wizard of Oz reference for some reason, Jack Bradfield's like totally out of shape. Like he's like way in the back, like huffing and puffing, while everybody's at the gate.
I always feel like, I don't know why I've always made this connection, but I feel like, I don't know why, this is going to be way out of left field. You're probably going to be like, where did that come from? I feel like Jack Bradfield's goal in the movie is to become like Glenn Guglia. Like, I don't know why.
But what's interesting is, like, when we met Glenn Guglia at the club and we saw his real self, there's an interesting side we see to Jack in a similar location, but it's so brief because there's one moment where he's almost human until he realizes he can benefit from it. When he's, like, practically drunk and he's watching Chet Stedman dance with her, and then Fish is saying, we're gonna, you know, sell him. And he's like, what do you mean sell him? He's a kid. Yeah. It's like for that 1 second, he's human. But then they're like, dude, you're going to get like $2-something billion. And he's like, oh, all right. And then it's gone.
Imagine if this movie was made today. You should see some of the baseball contracts there. It's crazy.
Yeah, and speaking of that, speaking of how it is in real life, as you were saying at the beginning, I do kind of want to go more into that, where you were talking about the concept feels like it was made just as a trailer.
Yeah.
Where, like, all those jokes are in there, where it's like, you have the kid that goes into, like, you know, the major league and all that, and it's stuff like, you can just see the trailer before your eyes. It's like, hey kid, how would you like to pitch for the Chicago Cubs? Oh yeah, I gotta ask my mom first. Or when he's like, you've been fined $500 for being late for practice. It's like, that's like 6 years allowance. It's like you can just see like the credits of the trailer coming up after those scenes.
Yeah.
But somehow, and yeah, I can see how like it could probably come off as annoying. Like I'm kind of surprised like people took to this upon release, because it seems like one of those movies that would have to grow over time, because it's sort of like, you know,
and you even
early
have like
90s comedy.
Like, and if you were gonna push your comedy, the two things you would push would be the kid and you would push Brickma. But there's a lot of deep concepts to it too, like the whole thing you were talking about earlier with the whole thing with his dad. It could easily be a situation where he just plays professionally and his friends think it's awesome, but there's actually a conflict created there.
Or the conflict could have been...
Which is interesting, because it's almost like an adult conflict told through a kid's eyes. Like I've had this conversation with my wife before, like, you know, we all have our friends that we had when we were growing up, and as we get older and drift more apart, we have less time to hang out with them. And Henry, by playing baseball, was already at that point, and those kids were still in the phase of where we hang out every day. Like, it was interesting to see that play out. And I didn't think they cheapened it either. I thought they played it well.
Because what they could have done was the scene when the Wizard of Oz reference, when they say, "Oh, players only," and it's like Henry. For some reason, he says goodbye 3 times. I never and then it's just the doors slowly closing on them. That could have been where the conflict between them started, like immediately, where they felt immediately shut out. But then it's not at all, because we get the scene later where the 3 of them go out on the field together, which is really nice. It's like we get to have that before the conflict, so it's like they held on as long as they could without a conflict.
They let us get to know them as friends before they threw a conflict at them.
Yeah, and it's very much the way it portrays kids in general and the way they interact is like really authentic too. Where like when the conflict is there, it's really brief. Like they get into a physical fight, but I mean the next time it's just, dude,
they're picking up chicks on the boat.
Yeah.
Like, and it's handled like a chick, where it's like, you know, I was mad at you before, but you're here. Let's just go hang out and do something. We'll figure it out later.
And the way just like the kids talk to each other. Like one of the lines I've always loved was the girl in the cafeteria when he's kind of trying to muster up the courage to talk to his crush. She's like, you know, I heard she doesn't think you're very ugly. One of my personal favorites is when George is gonna try to hit on that girl, and even though she's like sitting right in front of him, he's like, George, don't! Which immediately gets him to start doing it. But then there's also the way Henry acts and how authentic they make that. Like I said, yeah, he's doing like, I think the taunting scene sort of dates the movie a little bit with how kids behave. But then at the same time, there's the stuff like when he's playing the game and when he's like right in the middle of it, he goes like full on spectator when he shouldn't be.
Or like when he hits the ball, whoa!
And when he hits the guy with the ball and it's like, oh my god, I'm sorry. Or what was it was when it was the first time he throws the ball and the guys get pissed at him and like, are you trying to show me up, Henry? And it's like he threw the ball all the way to home plate, but the way when those guys get mad at him for doing that, he says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. It's like that is what a kid would say when he's being confronted by adults, something that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
But then of course we talked about that there is the we haven't talked about Brickma yet. And it's like, here's the thing though, is I can totally understand, like with most of Daniel Stern's over-the-top performances, I could get people not being into it. But the thing about it is, and I think that also goes back to the fact that this movie is based on a movie that's in the 50s. I do feel like, maybe if not Rugy's Bump specifically, this is a movie I could imagine in like that screwball era from like the 40s. With Brickma coming off very much like a one-man Laurel and Hardy, especially with the a lot of the physical gags, like the batting cage and the getting stuck between the doors and all that. To where it's like you could the tray flipping on the plane. It's like some of Brickma's dialogue is hilarious, but if you took out a lot of his dialogue and just focused on the physical, it's still like its own performance. And the fact that he was able to do that and direct at the same time, I think helps a lot too. He was able to kind of maintain his own control, probably, in a way where like maybe Chris Columbus would tell him like go crazy or something. But he really seemed to have control of that, so I think that helped a lot. So yeah, is that pretty much? Did we cover just about everything?
Is there anybody we didn't go into?
Neil Flynn, W. Earl Brown. Yeah, the janitor from Scrubs obviously is Stan Oki. W. Earl Brown is, oh my god, it's Billy Frick. So yeah, I think that's what we have here. Do you have a preference between the two? Obviously, Rookie of the Year has the upper hand because it's the one we kind of grew up with more, where we had to seek out the Sandlot. But I think that, much as I love Rookie of the Year, the Sandlot I do think, like, evokes something a bit more meaningful, and like, with the way it portrays friendship and the whole coming of age thing, and pretty much anything from, you know, like, exaggerated childhood stories to first love, you could say, between Squints and Wendy Peppercorn, and then the stepdad relationship with Leary. It's got a lot of stuff like that, and like, you see what I mean, where the Sandlot is like, that's kind of what the Sandlot's blood is. Whereas in Rookie of the Year, it's like nice moments, but it's not like they're not like the core of it.
Yeah.
So like the Sandlot is driven by those, whereas Rookie of the Year kind of has more of a plot that just happens to have some of this really sincere good stuff in it. So I think objectively is a strong word to use, but I mean if I were to say the closest thing to that, I mean I would probably say the Sandlot, of course, but
Yeah.
I think that it's hard to say given that Rookie of the Year is the one like I grew up on more. So.
But I think it's one of those cases where we always would have come across the Sandlot at some point. I think if we hadn't been introduced to Rookie of the Year so early, I don't know that that's one that we would have ever thought to seek out.
Do you blame this on the concept? Do you blame it on the concept?
Kinda.
Yeah. But that's the point we're kind of making though, is the fact that they made the concept work amazingly enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So is that it here?
That's it with these.
All right, we're getting ready to do another one right now that's a trilogy. And then from then on, I'll have one more for this month, and then we'll be in December already. So that'll be great. So yeah, and then obviously the review stuff and the Emily Blunt videos, all that stuff is still going on also. So until all that stuff, I'd say we're done.
Yeah.
All right, then that's it.